All right, well, good now afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call this emergency meeting of the Judicial Council of Georgia to order. Let me start with a couple housekeeping reminders. If you're a guest to the meeting, as the screen indicates, please email the RSVP account so we have an accurate count. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. It's open to the press and the public, and we may well have some members of the media on the Zoom. If you're not speaking, please mute your device. And if you have any problems with accessing the meeting, email or call Tracy Mason or Cheryl Karunas, and we'll try to get you connected again. I want to thank everybody for making yourselves available to meet on such short order. We have something to talk about that we are just in a position to be able to talk to the Judicial Council and the rest of the judicial community about, and we wanted to do it as soon as we were authorized to do that. Ms. Clanton, I don't know if you have a full roll call or do you need to do a roll of anybody who we're not sure is on?
I've got most of the people, Chief, but I just want to confirm Judge Arthur Smith, Judge Jeffrey Kite.
I'm here.
Thank you, Judge Kite. Judge Melanie Cross. Chief Judge Chris Brasher.
I'm here.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Fletcher Sams.
I'm here, thank you.
Judge Vi Bennett.
I'm here, thank you. Good afternoon, and go dogs.
Judge Sean Rhodes. Chief Judge Rebecca Pitts.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
And Judge Lori Duff, President of the Council of Municipal Court Judges. Chief, that completes the roll. Please proceed.
Okay, thanks. And Tracy, maybe we can drop the screen share at this point. I'll say up front, not just go dogs, but go Braves. Hopefully it'll be a good weekend for sports in Atlanta and Georgia and Jacksonville. So as most of you know, we have been hoping to get some of the federal ARPA money for use in the judiciary since that money was first allocated to Georgia earlier this year. In the spring of this year, Chief Justice Melton asked all of the councils to try to come together with ideas of how we might use ARPA money if we were able to get some, and we put together a proposal that we provided to the governor's office. We had a number of discussions over the summer. Many of you will recall David Dove from the governor's office came and spoke to some of the conferences of councils, but there wasn't a lot of movement. As I think we've said on other judicial council calls and meetings, the presiding justice and I have been working as hard as we could to try to get some of the ARPA money allocated to Georgia to the judiciary, and particularly prioritizing the issue of backlog cases. There's another big tranche potentially for infrastructure and technology type things. There's also is a tranche for things like PPE and plexiglass. And I'll just remind everybody that if you need things like plexiglass and PPE, GMA has a lot of it, and the governor's office has told them to make it available. And so you can always contact GMA for that. But the money we were talking about was backlogs. And I want to say, and as the press release the governor put out yesterday indicates, the governor has now agreed to allocate a total of $110 million in funds to help the judicial branch address backlogs of cases that are a result of the pandemic and the courts not being able to operate at full speed, with a priority of those funds to address the backlogs of serious violent felony cases in superior courts. And I want to make it very clear at the outset that none of this, not a dollar, is our money. This is federal ARPA money that comes with all kinds of restrictions to the state of Georgia. And the governor is providing $110 million of the state's allocation to the judicial branch or the judicial process, and that's coming with a whole bunch of additional restrictions. So we are operating within this set of federal and state restrictions as we try to figure out what to do with the funds we're getting. And it is an enormous amount of money in the general scheme of what we have available in the judicial branch. So the money is prioritized for serious violent crime backlogs in the superior courts, but as the presiding justice and I have pointed out, we have backlogs of a variety of other kinds of cases as well, including other felonies and civil cases in the superior courts and a variety of cases in all the other classes of court. And we need help potentially with the backlogs in all of those areas. And so while the priority is serious violent felony, and so if there's a proposal that addresses that problem, it will get priority. There should be enough money to help with backlogs in the other courts as well. And so it is available to almost all the other courts. There is one exception, which is the municipal courts. As we've already discussed with Judge Duff and the other leaders of the Municipal Court Council, the governor's office request at this point is every single municipality in Georgia has gotten ARPA money. Some of them have gotten it directly from the federal government. Some have gotten it, the smaller municipalities, less than 50,000 people, have gotten money through the state. They've gotten 50% of their money already. They're going to get another 50% next year, and it is an enormous amount of money that they have received. We also have not heard about huge backlogs in the municipal courts. But so for now, what the governor's office has requested is if the municipal courts have an issue with backlogs, that they go to their cities. Most of the cities have not yet determined how to allocate the money they got, and they're getting 50% more the second half next year in 2022. So if there is a backlog in a municipal court, they want you to go to the cities first and ask for help from the funding that's been allocated to the cities. All of these things we're going to talk about today are the initial requirements. It may change over time as we get a better sense of what's going on. And so it may be that down the road, if there are municipal courts that determine that they have serious backlogs and they cannot get, for whatever reason, funds from their municipality, we can go back and say, this is a situation we are seeing with the municipal courts, and they could potentially become eligible for this other pot of money. Related to that, one part of the grant proposal will be that you will have to explain if you have any other source of ARPA money, in particular from your county. So for example, Fulton County Superior Court and the judiciary in Fulton County has already gotten a very large amount of money from the ARPA funds allocated to Fulton County. That will make them less of a priority to get additional funds from this pot of $110 million. But that is going to be part of the application process. Have you gone to your county or any other source that's available of ARPA money? And have you already gotten some for this purpose? And could you get some for this purpose? Okay, so what can you use these funds for? At this time, initially, with the initial set of grants, the funding can be used for additional temporary people and space. So personnel and space that are going to be used to address backlogs of cases, again, with a priority on serious violent crime cases, on serious violent felony cases. Personnel, what are personnel? It's pretty much everything. Now, it's everything except the public defenders are included in this overall process, but they are not, they are in the executive branch budget. And so they are going to get $14 million off the top that's going to be allocated directly to the public defender through GPDC by the Office of Planning and Budget. So they're getting 14 million. They are not cut out of this process. They're just getting their money in a different way. The other 96 million will be allocated by Judicial Council, as I'll describe later. But what personnel? It's judges, it's senior judge money, it's pro hoc judges, it's law clerks potentially, prosecutors, public defenders from their piece, deputy clerks and other courtroom personnel or administrative people who are needed to deal with disposing of cases or helping you with cases and trials. It's bailiffs and other security personnel, whether those are paid by the court or by a sheriff's office. It's court reporters, it's interpreters. It's pretty much anybody you need to get a case through the system as part of the judicial process. You can potentially use this money to help hire people, premium pay, supplemental pay, within the restrictions of the federal rules and the state rules. And then space. If you need to rent additional space, make temporary changes to be able to handle cases in a safe way while the pandemic continues, you can use the money for that. What is very important is that this money needs to be thought about in a proportional way. And that's one of the reasons that OPB wants the courts and Judicial Council to be looking at these grant applications. If you give too much money to prosecutors and not enough money to public defenders, or too much for judges, or not enough for judges, or you can't get court reporters, then they're going to be bottlenecks and you're not going to be able to resolve your backlog. So it needs to be thought about in a holistic, proportional way. There are some pieces of this that are outside the judicial branch. A good example is we know there is a serious problem with forensic testing from the GBI. People are not being able to move cases because you can't get firearm results, DNA results, drug testing, etc. Well, the presiding justice has already talked to GBI and the governor's office. They're going to be getting some money, hopefully in the next regular budget process. But if you have a bottleneck that's outside our direct control, let us know, and we can either try to figure out a way with OPB and the governor's office to make sure that a bottleneck outside our control is being resolved, because otherwise none of this will work. So think about it holistically. Think about everybody you need to move the types of cases you have through the system. We may need to be creative about some things. You can't just go out and hire lots of judges. There are only so many senior judges, but there may be ways to have more pro hoc judges, or more judges who are associate magistrates who then can be designated. It is very hard to find court reporters. So we need to have some good ideas. If people have ideas of where we can find some additional court reporters, that's going to be a piece of this. Interpreters. It is probably easier to hire more prosecutors than public defenders. So, we have to look at this holistically and think about ways to try to make the whole system work. One important point is, particularly with the serious violent felonies, you may be able to hire personnel. A lot of the additional personnel will not be very experienced, particularly at doing the most complicated cases. So the idea that I know has already been discussed by OPB and PAC for the prosecutors and GPDC is, you can try to allocate your active judges and your more experienced prosecutors and public defenders and other staff to the hardest cases, and use the newly hired or temporary personnel to deal with some of the things that people who don't have to be as experienced can deal with. Okay, what can the funding not be used for? It cannot be used right now, at least, for permanent positions. It cannot be used for permanent space. So if you want to build something that's permanent, that's not really what we have the money for at this point. That includes other types of infrastructure like technology, other than things you may be able to justify as kind of, renting technology or short-term things to get your cases done. But, if you want to buy a new computer system or a new data system, that is not in this pot of money. We are hopeful that we will get additional pots of money in the future, or if we don't use all this money or can get through our backlogs without using all this money, that we'll be able to reallocate it to some of the other things I know many of you are interested in. But right now, it's temporary people and temporary space to deal with backlogs. The other thing you cannot use this money for is anything you've already paid for. So any expenses you have already incurred, including in responding to the pandemic, you cannot use this money for. This is forward-looking money. You also do not want to spend any money until you have received a grant, because you will not get it back through this grant process. So how's this work timing wise? We have 3 years to spend this money until December 31st, 2024. So the money is not going to be allocated all at once. We could not efficiently spend $110 million in the first year. The idea is that the grants will be awarded in a cycle over time. The exact timing of the grant windows and how long they'll last is going to be worked out by the committee, but it won't all be kind of up front. And what's really important about that is if you're not ready to ask for money, or you don't think you need money right now, you will not be prejudiced. The money will not all be gone before you have a chance somewhere down the road to apply for some money if your situation changes. I can tell you my court, for example, is not going to ask for any money right now because we don't have a backlog of cases right now. Our caseload's down because y'all aren't sending us as many appeals because you haven't done as much over the past 15 months as usual. But in 2 years, we're probably going to ask for some money because all of the cases you're going to clear out with this money are going to be flooding into our court and the Court of Appeals. So just be aware, it's not kind of we got to jump on this and kind of ask for more than we really could use right now, or never have a chance to get it. The grants will be paid probably on a monthly basis on a reimbursement system. It is a pay as you go. You will get a grant for certain things. You will incur the expenses for those things, and then you'll submit an invoice for reimbursement of those things and get reimbursed pretty quickly for them. But you will not get money by saying we're going to hire 18 new people, trust us, give us the money, and when we get around to hiring it, maybe we'll get them all. Maybe it'll be 6 months before we get them all. In the meantime, we'll have this ARPA money. The state is holding on to the ARPA money until you've actually incurred the expenses, and then they will fairly promptly reimburse you. We realize that may create some problems if you are in a low budget court or agency to be able to kind of front the money for up to a month before getting this flow of monthly money going. And that's something you can talk to AOC and the committee about, and we'll try to figure out ways to deal with it. But OPB has been very firm on the idea that this is not a we will give you money and see if you spend it system. It is you will get a grant, and when you actually prove that you are using the grant, you will start getting reimbursed. At the governor's request, the Judicial Council will be responsible for reviewing the grant applications and making the grants. Again, with the $14 million that's going to the public defenders being handled directly by OPB. Yesterday, pursuant to the Judicial Council's bylaws, as chair, I named an ad hoc committee to deal with this issue. Presiding Justice Boggs has agreed to chair the committee, and I want to thank him very publicly. I mean, this is an enormous undertaking, and he is willing to devote the time and energy needed to kind of oversee that process. The committee has a total of 13 members. The Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals and I have one appointment. The Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals is going to appoint Amanda Mercier, the Vice Chair of the Vice Chief of the Court of Appeals. My appointment is Pete Scandalakis, the Executive Director of PAC. That is because, again, the initial priority of this money is resolving serious violent felonies, and the prosecutors in particular have an important role in figuring out where the backlogs are and how to address them. The other 10 members of the committee right now are going to be the administrative judges of the 10 judicial administrative districts or the designees of those administrative judges. We are doing this partly to keep the committee a manageable size of voting members, partly to make sure that we have geographic diversity and we have people representing all of the different parts of the state. And partly, again, because the immediate focus of the money is backlogs of serious violent felonies, which are in superior courts. Part of the committee order charges those administrative judges or their designees for becoming particularly familiar with the situation in their administrative districts, so that we have a good handle when the committee meets of the situation statewide and how it compares from place to place. The committee can have advisory members as well. And I know the presiding justice is planning to have as advisory members a representative of every class of court, as well as other organizations like ACCG and the Georgia Municipal Association, so that we get input across the board. I'll also say the committee's membership may change over time. Again, right now, the priority is serious violent felonies in superior courts and other case backlogs. If the direction we get from the governor's office changes over time, we may alter the membership of the committee to kind of be focused on whatever the direction is at that point in time. This is a total 3-year process. The committee is going to be supported by the staff of AOC, and AOC has also agreed, and this is a big selling point for OPB, that AOC has agreed to handle the money flow. So when you get grants, you will submit your reimbursement requests, your invoices through AOC. AOC will bundle those for OPB, and will do a lot of the auditing and reporting and compliance. And I also want to very publicly thank Cynthia Clanton and her team. That will be an enormous amount of work to manage $100 million coming and going, and make sure it's spent properly and with the right controls. And they have already dedicated some really good people to that process. Darren Enns, who many of you know, will, I think, be the point person on the process side in terms of the grants and applications and instructions. And he's already been very active trying to get some forms done for the committee to look at. In the near future, and I'll let Justice Boggs, when I stop, give you a little sense of the time frame, but the committee is going to provide a grant application, instructions, some frequently asked questions, and there'll be an online portal with the idea of trying to make the application process as straightforward as possible. To try to limit the overall number of applications the committee asked to review to 50, which is already a lot, we are going to ask the Chief Superior Court judges to kind of assemble the grant application for their circuit for all of the classes of court and other agencies within their circuit. That will make sure, in part, that this idea that you're looking at it holistically is being met, because obviously the space needed for trials in superior courts may also be space that the state courts and magistrate courts need in certain places. And so you need to look at it holistically. And it may well be, though, just to repeat, it doesn't mean that if a circuit submits a grant application, it has to be for every single class of court in every single county. It may be that this county has a problem in state court, this county has a backlog in magistrate court, and all the counties have a backlog in serious violent felony cases. So we're just organizing it kind of on a circuit-wide basis. A couple points at the end. One is, as I said, we are hopeful that there may be more ARPA funds dedicated to the judiciary in the future. The state has billions of dollars in ARPA funds, although there are many demands on them. It's pretty amazing we're getting $110 million to deal with backlogs. Some of that money, again, may well be available once we clear out backlogs for other uses, but we are still asking for additional funds for things like infrastructure and longer term needs. But right now, we are pretty appreciative that the governor has given us these funds to deal with the most immediate problem of trying to get our backlogs cleared out and our operations back to more normal order. We are going to try to answer some of your initial questions and concerns today, but there are a lot of details that need to be worked out. I mean, we are just starting this process. This is the first time we have been able to talk about it publicly because we needed to wait for the governor to make the final decision to announce what he was doing publicly. The committee is going to come out with a lot more information and can address a lot of the questions you may have over the next few weeks. So I just want to ask you, if you're full of questions, to be a little bit patient. We're going to go as quick as we can, but there are going to be a lot of questions that we can't give you a good answer on right away. And there'll be questions that come up as we start getting into this process. The other thing I will very strongly ask you is if you have questions or concerns, direct them to me or Presiding Justice Boggs or Cynthia Clanton or Darren Enns. But please do not go directly to the governor's office or OPB. They have asked us to spare them those types of issues and to try to handle this within the judicial council structure. So we are trying to deal with this as a judiciary. We are trying to speak with one voice and do it as an integrated process. So if you have concerns or questions, you should not be, you should raise them and not be inhibited at all from raising them. But we are trying very hard to, figure out questions and concerns that we already know the answers to or can't give you an answer to. And then to the extent there are things we think we can ask OPB or the governor's office to reconsider or down the road ask them, we can do that, but we can do it with, a single meeting or phone call rather than a flurry of phone calls or meetings. So that's kind of the overview. Let me turn it over to Presiding Justice Boggs to add anything I left out or correct anything, and also to talk to you a little bit about the committee plan. AJ.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief, and hello, everyone. First, let me say, on behalf of our court, and I know the Chief feels this way and my colleagues feel this way, how appreciative we are for everything you all have done over the last 15 months to address your backlogs. I mean, we're in a better shape than we were a year ago, and that's completely attributable to your efforts. And so from all classes of courts, we know you've all kept courts open, you've all embraced technology, you've all done really, really terrific work in making sure that defendants' rights were protected, that processes were protected, and that cases were moved. So we're very appreciative. In no particular order, let me talk just very briefly about a couple of highlights and reiterate a few things the Chief said that bear repeating. On funding through the AOC, just remember that the way this funding will work, we hope will be in an expeditious way, because we were not going to have to wait on OPB approval for these things. So we will submit your grant request directly to OPB and hope to get pretty quick turnarounds on funding. So that is because that's how we asked to do it, and they were willing to let us do it that way. Secondly, you should know we've been advocating for ARPA funds, COVID relief funds generally, for the last year, and it's taken quite a while to get to this point. So we're very appreciative to the folks that have entrusted us with these funds. But just know that we are not in charge of all of this money. We are limited by the parameters that have been placed on us by the governor's office, by OPB, and by Treasury. And I say that because I know many of you, like me, have waded through the volumes of information that are contained online and available online about eligible uses for American Rescue Plan Act funds. And you will have read that you can pay for public health workers, you can pay money to households, you can pay money to small businesses, you can replace, there's replacement revenue funding available, premium pay for essential workers, water and sewer and broadband. And I will tell you that even if you and I agree on how some of this money is eligible pursuant to promulgated Treasury regs, we don't have the luxury of spending money that way. We are limited by the parameters that have been given to us, which have been outlined by the chief. Secondly, with respect to the committee, I think it bears repeating that the full committee that the chief has established, the ad hoc committee of the Judicial Council, is subject to change. It's focused right now on serious violent crime case backlogs, and that's why it's structured the way it is. But it does bear repeating that that very well could be revisited at any particular time as our restrictions and parameters from OPB and the governor's office might change. Secondly, I'm working very heavily on ensuring that the advisory committee members, which I have the authority to appoint, is properly representative of all classes of courts, including municipal courts, but it also includes all stakeholders. And so I'm in the process of getting an order together that would give us a full complement of advisory stakeholder members that can help us move this dialogue along. With respect to the committee that I'll be chairing, the chief has outlined what that committee composition is made up of. I will tell you that we are wanting to move immediately. And so even though we're now sharing this with you, we've known for about 2 weeks that this was coming. And so we are fairly well prepared to present an application to the committee for its approval, to submit instructions and frequently asked questions to the committee for approval, to make sure that the website portal is available. And we will try to do all of that in a committee meeting that I hope to hold next week. You should know that contemporaneous with all of that, because many of you have already reached out with some very thoughtful questions, we are planning additional meetings even before the committee meeting with OPB to try to answer some of those questions early on about eligible uses in particular. And also because this process is going to be largely driven by the chief judges of the respective 50 judicial circuits, I am personally going to meet in a Zoom meeting, hopefully next week, with all of those judges. They will be invited to participate in a meeting where we will have a more in-depth conversation about their role in handling the application process for all inferior courts within that circuit. I mean, we cannot manage, AOC cannot manage, I and my committee cannot manage 350 various applications coming in at every day of the year over the 3-year period that this process will be completed. And so we're really entrusting our Superior Court judges to help vet, assemble, and coordinate the delivery of those applications in a way that is manageable for my committee. So we really are looking forward to hearing from you all. I want you to know that I'm going to be very interested in hearing your questions. We may not have an answer for all of your questions. Please bear with us as we try to work through those questions with OPB. And from all of the classes of courts, I think it also bears repeating that while the primary focus of these funds is on clearing the backlog of serious violent crime cases, there is going to be some money available for other classes of courts, and we're looking forward to helping you remediate some of those issues. And so that's my spiel for today. You all that are on the committee will be getting notice today of a meeting for next week. You will get agenda materials on Monday. I'll be meeting with OPB on Tuesday, and we hope very shortly after accepting applications that we will then be meeting with the chief judges of each circuit to let them know what's going on. You should also know that this process is fairly fluid, and so please bear with us as we try to get our bearings. We will have, I expect, different windows of application processes throughout the year. So if you miss that first opportunity to apply, there will be a front-loaded system of applications, at least in this first year, so that you can quickly turn around and get an application in if you're slow out of the gate on the first application process. So Chief, that's what I have with respect to the committee at this point, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, and PJ again for taking on this task. And I will say, we do not have a very good sense of the degree of backlogs in all the courts around the state, and the degree that you have already, based on other measures, dealt with those backlogs or dealing with them, or have obtained other funds from ARPA to deal with them. So one of the things that we're going to find out in this early round of applications is, where are the significant problems and how bad are they? And until that point, we don't really know how much of this money will have to go closer to the front end to deal with those issues, and how much, can be spaced out into the second and third year, and also potentially let us ask for additional uses of the money. Let Cynthia, I want to thank you again for kind of AOC's leadership in this. Do you have anything to add from your perspective?
No, sir, but we're ready to go. Thank you, Chief.
Well, let's open it up for any initial questions or concerns. If you want to state them in this group, and again, if you want to do them more privately, feel free to contact me or the presiding justice or Cynthia or Darren. But questions off the bat?
How soon do you think the first application process will begin?
My expectation, I'm not sure who asked the question, but my expectation is that we will have the first window in November for awards in December, for expenditures in January. So it's going to be very quickly turned around. We're pretty well ready, but we've got to have the committee approve all of the processes. We've got to adopt governance procedures for my committee. But my expectation is that the first window for applications will be in November.
Then the second one might be, in January. So
I expect the second one to be in January. We'll probably get on a quarterly basis after that, but if you miss the window in November, you're going to be eligible again in January.
Other questions?
And let me, while we're waiting on questions, Chief, I'll answer one that I know I've heard from others. We're not yet sure whether, we'll be doing the grant applications will be for funds to be expended in calendar years. So for example, the November open window money would likely have to be spent by the end of calendar year 22. And then if you apply, we'll have open periods at the end of 22 for spending in calendar year 23. So we don't have, for fiscal accounting purposes, it would be easier for us to manage that money that way. And so even if you applied late in 22 for money to be spent by the end of 22, we're still going to have open windows and opportunities for you to do that. But it would be limited to the end of the year, and then you'd have to apply again for the next open period for the next calendar year.
All right, other questions at this point? All right, I know this is a lot of information we're kind of hitting you with, but we've had a little bit of a window to think about some of these things, but not able to do it in any public way because till the governor actually said it out loud, he's got the right to change his mind. So we had to wait till yesterday to announce things, but we wanted to get out the information we have as quick as we could. And there'll be lots more information coming soon. Again, I appreciate all of you being able to gather on this short notice, and stay tuned for a lot more coming from the committee and AOC over the next few days and next few weeks. And this, for an organization that often worries in our Judicial Council budget about asking for an extra, $16,000 for a part-time additional employee, this is a pretty crazy amount of money, and we want to spend it efficiently and for the right purposes, but it's an incredible opportunity that we've been given to help with the problem we have. And once we get that problem done, hopefully help with some other issues we have. And so I hope we'll all look at it that way and try to make the best of this opportunity. Our next meeting will be, regular meeting will be on December 10th by Zoom. If we need to have another emergency meeting before then, we'll do so. If you are running into other issues, particularly pandemic-related issues, as I mentioned, please raise them. If there's a part of the system that is clogging things up, let us try to figure out a way to unclog it so that it doesn't mess up everything you're doing. And again, thank you for what you do and everything you've done throughout this pandemic. We're in a little better world right now. The numbers are dropping. Hopefully they won't go back up in the winter. But we have an opportunity to get our system back on track and hopefully make it even better going forward. And that's largely the work of Georgia's judges and the people you work with. So thank you. And we will be soon in contact. And I will end the meeting at this time. But I hope you have a good weekend and go Dogs, go Braves.